Hey everyone, welcome to a review I've been wanting to do for a very long time. Ever since the game came out, even before I had a YouTube channel or had any sort of online presence, I've just really been wanting to talk about my thoughts on this game and how I feel like it's been greatly misunderstood by the gaming press. And I think it's been kind of dogpiled on by the internet. One bad review, a bunch of people see the bad review, don't actually play the game, and just tack on to that bad review and say, oh yeah, I agree with that. I bet that's right, without actually playing the game or trying it. Or maybe people did get the game, they did play it, but they came into it with this negative attitude, this expectation to shit on the game, and so when the game presented them with a bit of a challenge, that instead of taking it on, it was more of like, oh, this game sucks, I hate this game, it's stupid. In fact, just to tell you how bad the reception of this game is, I have some friends who are, diehard Nintendo fans, and I bought a Wii U specifically for Star Fox Zero. I mean, there was other things I was going to do with the Wii U, but I mean, the reason I bought it was to play Star Fox Zero. And I was telling my friend about that, and he was like, really? I think that's a waste of money. The game's getting really bad reviews. I heard the controls suck. I heard the gameplay sucks. I've heard it's not a good game. It's just Star Fox 64 again, but with bad controls. That's basically the internet opinion of Star Fox Zero, is Star Fox 64 with bad controls. So let's start off by meeting that head on. Let's talk about the control scheme, the big hot button issue everyone just cannot let go of or doesn't even want to try and give it a chance for. So Star Fox Zero has gyro motion controls, which are not present in Star Fox 64, and they are required to play the game. The game makes you use them. It doesn't let you use a Pro Controller, which I know got a lot of people mad. Oh, why can't I play it with a Pro Controller? And also got them mad because, oh, why can't I turn off the motion controls and just play it like Star Fox 64? So, yeah, this is going to be a video just to warn maybe my newer subscribers or people who are kind of new to my content, or maybe you've come across this video. I'm going to be a little more pretentious and, I don't know, I guess intense than my usual content, but I feel like this situation is sort of warranted because I don't know how to beat around the bush with this issue. I feel like, honestly, a lot of the people who have reviewed the game aren't very good at rail shooters to begin with. They're not very good at arcade games to begin with. They don't understand hardcore games like shmups or rail shooters, those types of genres. They're just your average Nintendo fan who plays Mario games or whatever. And yeah, they're expecting just this easygoing time. And here comes Star Fox Zero pushing the player. So let's start off with my thoughts on why I feel like the forced motion controls are justified. And let me preface that by saying that now in the year 2019, the Wii U has been cracked open and you can do all kinds of fun stuff to the Wii U, which I have done. And one of those fun things you can do is you can now force the Wii U to use a DualShock 4 for everything. You can basically trick the Wii U into thinking a DualShock 4 is a gamepad. So the people who hate motion controls, the people who cannot stand the idea of this game being playable only with motion controls on a gamepad, well, it is now possible to play this game on a DualShock 4 and play it just like it was Star Fox 64. With that good old-fashioned, style. But, which I have now done, and which I will say, now that I have done both, I feel like the gamepad and motion controls make the game way better, way more fun, and also they just perform better. You'll get higher scores with the gamepad and the gyro controls than you would just playing with Star Fox 64 style controls. The reason why, I guess in case it's not obvious, is that in Star Fox 64, the direction of your ship directly, controlled where your bullet went. So in order to shoot something, you had to move towards it. Which, greatly limits to what you can do, what kind of aerial combat you can pull off. In Star Fox Zero, you can now fly alongside stuff and shoot it. You can fly the opposite direction of something and shoot it. Or go like this. the amount of options of where you can place your ship and fire on your enemies is greatly enhanced. The shit you can pull off with the motion controls is just way more efficient than trying to fly towards everything. I think this section here you'll see a perfect example of that, where I will fly over a ship, fly over a ground enemy, and just fire right down on it without ever having to kind of lunge toward it. And as someone who's played a lot of Star Fox 64, this is the main trouble you always run into in Star Fox 64 is you're trying to get those last hits on a guy, but there's just not enough time, and so you're like either going to ram him or you have to completely back off. Well, in Star Fox Zero now, with these controls, you can just kind of pull to the side and keep firing without ramming into him. So this section here is a good example of that. You can just, well, right here I kind of mess it up, but you can get right overhead and just fire down on him. So let's start by talking about the motion controls, the gamepad, and why I think people have such a hard time wrapping their heads around this. To begin with, I think most people, we have to go back and actually talk about Star Fox 64, because I feel like a lot of the misunderstanding around Star Fox Zero it's like a double layered cake. I think most people misunderstand Star Fox 64 and then carry that forward to misunderstanding Star Fox Zero even more. So I'll start off by talking about my thoughts on just things people say about Star Fox 64 that make me kind of shake my head a little bit. So one of them, because they come up in the reviews for Star Fox Zero, they'll say, oh, well, Star Fox 64 is a game where you could beat it in half an hour. You know, is that really worth the full price tag these days with all the options, with all the RPGs, with The Witcher 3, where you can spend $60 and play for 1 trillion hours or whatever? Well, I feel like I know shmup fans are very familiar with this sort of thinking, that people think they beat a shmup by credit feeding their way through. And I beat Mushi by credit feeding my way through it, right? That game, well, you can beat it in half an hour and then that's it, right? To shmup fans, that sounds ridiculous. And I think it holds true for Star Fox 64 too, because Star Fox 64, I don't think even many people are aware, has a second mode called Expert Mode, which you unlock by medaling all the stages. So for me, I would say you can't beat Star Fox 64, even if you're the best Star Fox 64 player in the world, in 30 minutes, because you have to do at least 6 runs. You have to do 3 runs of the 3 different routes on normal, and then you got to do 3 more runs of all the expert routes, and that's best case scenario, where you know what you're doing. And even that's going to take you at least a few hours. But of course, like a shmup, the real depth of Star Fox 64 is in the scoring system, is in the medaling system, which I think a lot of people don't engage in. And so, I'm bringing all this up because when people start by talking about Star Fox Zero's problems, they really need to remember where the roots of this game are actually coming from. It is a rail shooter, it's not an RPG, and so it's going to be a more hardcore game than what people are expecting. And I think that's really what happened, is everyone came into Star Fox Zero thinking it was going to be a Mario game or a Zelda game. That's what they were actually looking for. And then when Star Fox Zero said, hey, remember all those really hard maneuvers in Star Fox 64? You know, like trying to do banking turns while lock firing on stuff without ramming into enemies? Well, now you don't have to do that because you have these gyro motion controls. But people don't appreciate that change because they're never doing banking turns into enemies in the first place, right? They were just probably flying down the middle of the screen, barrel rolling the entire time. And so that's what I want to get at, is that if you play Star Fox 64 for score, if you play the game to try and medal it, to try and maximize your score in that game, you're going to find that Star Fox 64 is actually a very complicated game control-wise. It's got a lot going on because you have to do a lot of simultaneous button presses. Like you got to bank, you got to brake, you got to charge, and then you got to fire. You're hitting, and then you got to fly your ship the whole time while you're doing it. So your hand is hitting like 4 different buttons. And actually on an N64 controller, you can't do it normally. You have to like claw it. You have to claw the N64 controller to even do some of this stuff. But on Star Fox Zero, they said, okay, we're going to make these controls better by remapping your banking and your barrel rolls stick, right? And then you're flying. And then you're firing here, and they gave you a burst fire. No one talks about that. So in Star Fox 64, you have to manual fire every single shot. So you're just like hammering the shit out of that button all day. You know, it's old school Metal Slug syndrome. It's just stupid. But in Star Fox Zero, they gave you a burst fire. So now you're doing this. You know, it fires 3, 1 button press, like, you know, Dodonpachi or something. So that's a huge improvement no one talks about. And then the barrel rolls and the braking and fast whatever boosting. In Star Fox 64, the braking and the boosting was very temperamental and very limited. It's alright, but you don't have a whole really solid control over your ship. In Star Fox 64, your ship, even when you get really good at the game, always feels kind of temperamental. It always feels like it's just one mispress away from slamming into something, just because of the braking system and boosting system is so temperamental. In Star Fox Zero, they've adjusted it to where the braking lasts a lot longer. It's a smoother roll-off. It just gives you way better control over your ship. Same thing with boosting, and same thing with your barrel rolls. So in Star Fox 64, it kind of has that Star Fox Super Nintendo thing where you have to really hammer that button to get a good barrel roll and to get a good bank. Whereas in this, it's just the stick here. It's very intuitive. Flip, flip. So now they've simplified the controls where you're not having to claw anymore. You can just use the 2 thumbsticks. And now instead of having to hammer this Z trigger, you can now burst fire like this. And then bombs, right? Bombs were always a problem because you're clawing, doing braking, banking, charging, flying. I mean, it's ridiculous. But when you start doing that in Star Fox Zero, it's all here. And then when you need to bomb, you can just press in the stick. Now you're bombing. Okay. And so then we come into the controversial feature, right? The motion controls. Well, all you have to do is just play the game. And this is actually what it looks like when you play Star Fox Zero. But it's more down here, but the camera can't see that. So it's not this awkward because you can hold it down. This is what you're doing. You lift, drop, bank, bank, slide, slide. That's all you have to do. It's very consistent. It's very precise. It's honestly some of the best motion controls I've ever used in my life. It's very good. These gyro controls are not Wii bowling. I think people think, oh, it's like Star Fox Wii Bowling Edition. No, these gyro controls are really precise. You don't need that stupid sensor bar. It's all built into the gamepad. The gamepad itself is a really solid controller, too. So, I really don't know. Everyone just complains about these issues, but they never break down, okay, what is the actual problem? Is the gamepad actually a bad controller? No. Is it too heavy for you, I guess? It's not a heavy thing. It's light. It's really not that different from playing a controller, you know. And so then the motion controls are just absurdly good. They're way better than, like, you know, the 6-axis controller and stuff. It's just way better. And so, yeah, that's why they force you to use the gamepad. It's because it has superior motion controls, and they want you to use those superior motion controls because the game is designed that way. Same thing with turning off motion controls. So a lot of people said, well, why can't you just turn them off? Why do you have to play them? And of course, you could say that you can definitely beat this game without motion controls. That is completely true. I've done it. But the thing is so this is where my opinion is probably going to differ from most people, but I think it was kind of a bold decision on Platinum and Nintendo's part to say, no, you have to actually learn to play the game. You have to learn what the game is trying to get you to do. A good example in my mind is, again, I play arcade games a lot. Arcade games are my favorite genres of games. So I view Star Fox Zero as a cross between a rail shooter and a light gun game. It's like the best of both worlds. The gyro motion controlling is like playing a light gun game, and then of course the Star Fox aspects is the rail shooter. And so one of my favorite light gun games of all time is a game called LA Machine Guns. Look it up. What it is it's an arcade game where it has this giant machine gun mount, and you play the game controlling the mount, and you're firing. That's the game. And so, yeah, an internet reviewer of 2019 could say, well, why can't you play LA Machine Guns with a mouse and keyboard? Why do you have to play with this giant gun mount? Like, what's the point there? Why don't I play LA Machine Guns with a DualShock 4? It's like, you could, but the fun of the game is physically controlling that mount and firing it. Like, that's the fun of the game. I feel like the same thing as Star Fox Zero, where it's not just about efficiency, it is fun once you learn the game, learn the coordinated movements to actually physically control where you're firing. It's fun. And that's kind of the appeal of the game. And so when people don't like that, that's fine. But I feel like it's one thing to say, I don't like light gun games. I don't like having to physically aim my shots. I prefer just to use a mouse and keyboard. That's one thing, and that's fine. But to shit on the game and to say it has bad controls because you don't like using the gun mount, I think is bad game journalism, to be honest. I feel like that's kind of the attitude people took towards Star Fox Zero, is they didn't like that the game asked you to have some sort of coordination and to actually fire your gun. So they said the game has bad controls. But the thing is, if you learn how to do it, if you learn the hand movements, if you learn the coordinated movements, the controls are amazing because they are reliable, they're precise, you can do some really good, efficient firing and gameplay once you learn them. So a bad control would be something like Wii Bowling, where especially on those early Wii remotes where the cursor, the motion controls are just unreliable, they're unresponsive, they're just like sliding around, being ridiculous. Star Fox 64 isn't like that. Once you get good at the game, it's precise. It does what you want, when you want, every time. It doesn't have bad controls. And the shame is that once you learn it, it's really fun. Then it's kind of depressing because this is like the only game on Earth that has this. That has this combination of a rail shooter and a light gun game. You're like, what? Like, I would love to see more of this. I would love to see more games do this. But unfortunately, because of just the way the whole gaming media has acted, it's not going to happen. No one's going to take that risk anymore. They're like, well, remember, Nintendo took one of the most popular rail shooter property, Star Fox Zero, and people just shat on it like there's no tomorrow because it had these gyro motion controls. And I also think it's funny that some of these same critics nowadays complain about there not being gyro motion controls in like the Resident Evil port. It's like, well, make up your mind. You hated them in Star Fox Zero, but now you like them. Anyway, you can see the rage here. So, anyway, let me get back to the game itself a little bit more. So, yeah, again, I think the controls are really good. They're unique because no one else had the balls to do this, essentially. So, yeah, that's going to be what it is. So if you're not willing to learn how to control this game, you're going to have a hard time. But at the same time, if you're going to work on your coordination a little bit, work on your aim a little bit, it will be good because the game itself is reliable, it's precise, it does what you want it to do once you learn how to play it. So I think the sign of bad controls is where it's unreliable, it's unprecise, it's inefficient, and I don't think you can really make that argument. In fact, there's some high scores people have gotten playing Star Fox Zero with the motion controls. I would be very surprised if someone was able to beat those scores without the motion controls. To just beat them using a DualShock 4 because you can do that now because of the hacking, and just ramming into everything basically. Like, I don't think the level design is going to suit that gameplay very well. So that's another part too, is that I think that's why Nintendo said no, you have to use the motion controls, because the level design, it's pretty critical to the level design that you have them, because especially with like Andross and some of the later stuff, like these fights here and stuff, it's just really helpful to be able to free aim and fire, because they could make the game harder. They could make the enemies more aggressive. They could do a lot of different things. They could make the enemy layouts different. There's some boss fights that would be downright silly without the motion controls, because you're just going to be ramming into the boss and getting murdered. So that's why they forced you to use them, because they're better and you need them. So that's why they forced you, if that helps anyone feel a little better. And if you really cannot stand the idea of using them, just mod your Wii U with a DualShock 4 and play it that way. I mean, that's still better than not playing the game, in my opinion. So I don't know if I've covered the controls enough, just because this has been such a hot topic issue, and I know it'll be like the main thing people definitely want to talk about are the controls. So maybe I should give you a little bit of guidance on what to do, because I also feel like a lot of people have said the game's really complicated to play, but I think a lot of that is people don't quite know what they're doing a lot of the time, and so then it gets frustrating because you know what you're doing. So the first criticism about the controls that I definitely want to address is people saying that when you're playing this, you're constantly having to do this. You have to look at your gamepad, look at the TV, look at your gamepad, look at your TV. As someone who's played this game a lot, that's actually not true. You rarely ever need to actually look at your gamepad. You can almost exclusively look at the TV. And the reason why people think that is because there's these sections where the game will zoom out and kind of Z-lock onto bosses or during cutscenes. What it'll do is it'll zoom out, but on your gamepad you're in first-person mode. And so you're supposed to look down and play in first-person mode while the cutscenes play out on this big screen. Or you can hit the select button and just play in first-person mode. So you'll see in this playthrough, I don't think a lot of people realize you could just do that. So you'll see in this playthrough, whenever it does these cutscenes or does these boss fights, where you're locked on in this kind of free-range thing, where people are really struggling with that, they're saying, oh, I have to do this and that, just switch to first-person mode and play in first-person mode. It's, yeah, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I personally enjoy playing in first-person mode, and I think the sections that kind of force you to do that are appropriate sections to do that in. Because that's another thing about Star Fox 64 that I always thought was weird, was that, I don't know if people know this, but in Star Fox 64 you can also play that in first-person mode, but it's never really utilized. It's just there, just for swagness, I think. And so I think what Platinum was thinking here was that, okay, we have this first-person mode, let's use it. Let's make them, play the game in first-person mode for a few minutes here. Which are usually just boss fights or short sections. So, like you saw that boss fight in Stage 1, a lot of people, when you watch reviews on it, they're really struggling because they don't know what they're doing. They're just flying around, ramming into stuff. Just flip over to first-person mode and play. That's all you have to do. So, there's that. People have those sections. Another criticism that people did, which I think is definitely a valid criticism, but I do want to explain it a little bit, is the accidental loops. So in Star Fox Zero, because you're using both sticks to fly around, you will start doing accidental loops. You'll accidentally do like I don't know what you call it, a loop. Instead of, you're just trying to brake and pull up usually, but instead you do an accidental loop. I hate when that happens. And yeah, that is a valid criticism. However, I do want to point out that that happens in Star Fox 64 as well. When you start braking and banking in Star Fox 64, you will get accidental loops all the time. So it's a problem with the game, but it's also a problem with the series that I think is kind of a little bit tricky to solve. So I think it would have been good if they got rid of it. But again, I think people are just kind of dogpiling on the game at this point, where it's like, oh, these accidental loops. Yeah, that was in Star Fox 64 as well. So yeah, that kind of sucks, but if you're aware of it, you can avoid it. But yeah, no one likes that. So there's that. So let's talk about other aspects of this game, right? Because I've gone on about the controls love. I think I've made my case as to why I think the controls are good. That I think people just didn't want to learn how to play the game. There's a training. My advice to you is what first thing you want to do is you want to just maybe brush up with a little bit of Star Fox 64 to remind yourself how these games play a little bit, and then go ahead and play some Star Fox Zero. And you'll notice, oh, a lot of that stuff that was a struggle in Star Fox 64 is a lot easier in Star Fox Zero because the controls are better. Especially the control mapping is way better. You don't have to claw anymore. But on that, so then just to learn to play in the training mode for a bit, like spend an hour or two learning the arm movements. Because once you learn it, it's not that bad. It's a matter of learning it, you know? It's like learning a fighting game on an arcade stick, right? You have to kind of spend a little time to learn it, but once you do, it works. Same thing with this game. I think that's just what everyone's issue is people didn't want to learn the controls. Most people probably never did, so they could never play the game and really get a hang of it. The only reviewer who I saw actually did that was Gerard the Completionist, so I feel like his Star Fox 60 or Star Fox Zero review from that era is definitely the best, because he actually had to play the game, right? And unlike the Polygon guy who just quit right out the gate, you know, which I have a lot of things I could say about that, but I just don't think that's obviously the sign of a qualified journalist, right? If you can't even bring yourself to learn a control scheme. I don't know. I could go on about that a lot, but I don't know. I think that's really ridiculous, and it gave the game a lot of unnecessary bad press. Oh, this game reviewer can't even bring himself to play the game because the controls are so bad. It's pretty ridiculous in my opinion. It kind of just shows what game reviewers are like these days, in my opinion. Yeah, I talk about this with shmup reviews as well, as like a lot of them really don't have a lot of chops when it comes to hardcore style games, stuff like rail shooters, shmups, fighting games. You know, they're more suited to mainstream type genres. But anyway, I've kind of lost my thread there, but okay, let's get back to the gameplay of the game. So when you're first learning it, my opinion is you're going to want to switch the motion controls over. There's an option to turn them on to only when you're firing that they work. Go ahead and do that. That's the better version rather than always on, because if you have them on when only firing, that gives you a chance to kind of reset them in between enemy patterns and stuff. Another thing to do, another huge tip is use this to reset your reticle, which I actually don't have to do that often, but usually whenever you do a gyro movement, like, so you do this for a while, you kill the enemy formation or whatever, after you do that, go ahead and reset it. And so, yeah, because this game, again, has those light gun type, I love light gun games, by the way. I think you'll see more content about those on this channel, but it has those light gun elements. Yeah, you have to learn a little bit of coordination. So when you're playing, just try and hold it like this in your hand, neutral. Just kind of cradle it. It'll be stable like this. You just hold it like this, and then again, just kind of tip up, down, do these movements, and then reset. And then, yeah, just practice this in training mode for a few hours. You should have it. It's really not that big of a deal. I think the problem is people just go into the game. Again, I want to emphasize this, because I think this is what happened, is people aren't good at Star Fox 64 to begin with. They just, again, played it when they were a kid, made it to Andros. They forgot, like, how frantic the gameplay of Star Fox actually is. And then they jump into Star Fox Zero, where they don't really know how to play Star Fox 64, and then they don't know how to use the motion controls in Star Fox Zero, and so it's just a rude awakening for a lot of people. But, however, for me, I played a lot of Star Fox 64 before this game came out, a lot. I think I, even directly before I was so excited for it to come out, I remedaled all of Star Fox 64 a few times. And then, so when I first played this game, my reactions were very different. My thoughts were, wow, they fixed a lot of shit. Like, Platinum did their homework. And so that's why it really bothers me a lot, because I feel like almost every decision they made was the right decision. If you come from the perspective of you're trying to get high scores in these games, you're trying to make the controls more precise, more reliable, give yourself more options as far as movement, giving yourself more options in terms of, like I said, you can fly alongside things now, or like if something sneaks by you, like in this, in Star Fox 64, you're just screwed. If something, because that can happen a lot. What happens in Star Fox 64 all the time is that I'm just pointing at the camera like a crazy person. You'll be pointed at an enemy kind of far off on the screen, and you'll be locked onto him, and then some dude just spawns to the left. Shit. And so you try and unlock and catch that guy. But in Star Fox 64, as soon as they pass the barrel of your gun, they're gone. They're safe. You can't hit them. In Star Fox Zero, you can spin your gun and still hit them. So what that means is that this game can throw a lot more dense enemy patterns at you, and you can just blast the shit out of them, because you can blow them up on the right, and then as they come to pass you on the left, you can just turn and fire at them. So, yeah, like I said, if I could play Star Fox 64 with these controls, I definitely would, because I think you could do some wild stuff, honestly. And so just watch my gameplay here of me, and I feel like this is really solid gameplay. There are better Star Fox Zero players out there, like Zallard, but I think this is some of the most quality you'll see, just because no one bothers to play this game. And so every stage here is a medal clear or whatever. So anyway, yeah, just keep an eye out for that. Like, keep an eye out for all the things that these motion controls are actually allowing me to do that you can't actually do otherwise. And then I think so let's talk about the flaws of this game, right? Because this sounds all like it's just 100% unanimous praise, but there are problems with this game, but I feel like none of it has to do with the controls. The controls are really good. You just need to learn how to play them. Once you learn how to play them, the game's really fun. If you don't want to do that, the game's not for you. I don't tell you. Like I said, it's a light gun game and a rail shooter. So if you don't like having to physically aim your gun, you want to just use your mouse and keyboard, don't play the game, because it's not for you. But if you do like light gun games, you do like rail shooters, and you are really intrigued by a game that tries to do both, and I think does well, then I think this game's an absolute must. You gotta get it. Because there probably won't ever be another one like this. The gaming public has spoken, and these games are not gonna happen anymore, so that's why I'm also feeling really inspired to make this video, because I feel like if people come to the game with the right mindset, they'll find, wow, this is a really fun game. I can't believe I, pass it over just because the internet was being a bunch of, scrubs. So that's kind of my main reason of making this video, honestly. But anyway, back to the flaws of this game. So Star Fox Zero does a lot of stuff right. So, okay, the controls are good. I talked about that. Another thing I really like is the level designs mostly. So of all the shooting stages, like the ship stages, the tank stages, I think the level designs are really well done. I think Platinum has done a really good job with this game, and yeah, again, it's a shame that their efforts were not really recognized at all. And honestly, I feel like a lot of what makes this game good comes down to Platinum, not Nintendo. And, I love Platinum games. Everyone, who doesn't, right? Who doesn't love Platinum games? So, I don't think I need to defend their ability to make a good game. But it's funny, because everyone said, oh, Platinum slumping with Star Fox Zero. I was like, I don't think that's true. I think Star Fox Zero is a really good game. But the issues with it are definitely those freaking gyro levels, or not gyro, whatever the hell that helicopter thing is. I think it's the gyro. Those levels suck. Those levels should be played to get the medals and then never play them again. Those levels are shitty. And my theory as to why they exist is because Miyamoto really wanted them in. Like, every time he did press for this game, he's always talking about those freaking helicopter levels and how cute and neat they are, and how, oh, you can like drop down, and those levels suck. They're just awful. They're like Aquas. They're not good levels. And so that's a flaw in the game, is those levels, play them once to get, play them a few times to get the medals, and then never play them again, because they're not good. They're like the antithesis of what makes Star Fox fun. They're slow, they're boring. The controlling that ship is, it's not like hard, but it's just kind of stupid. It's like, yeah, they simulated what it's like to fly a helicopter pretty well. Like, if you play old flight sim games with helicopters, it's pretty accurate to that. But helicopters are like the lamest things to fly usually in like flight sim games, in my opinion. And then it's also just, it'd be cool if it was like an attack chopper, and that would have been the cool way to go about it, is instead of doing this weird, like, carrier type thing, if it was like in a Ketsui style attack chopper, and he had like a ton of lock-ons, so you could lock on to tons of enemies and blow them up and stuff, and used missiles instead of lasers. But instead it's just, yeah, those levels aren't good, so that's a huge flaw, because that's 2 levels wasted, right? So I just consider it's like 2 Aquas levels, right? Because Aquas and Star Fox sucks. So, yeah, so those aren't good. So that's a flaw. Another flaw is the lack of content, I feel like. Post-game, I guess you could say, or the lack of expert content. So let me explain. So this game is not low on content. I feel like it's pretty equivalent to Star Fox 64, even after you remove those chopper levels. It's still pretty equivalent to how many good stages Star Fox 64 has. But it's just a few. It's like one really good stage shy. It needs a Zonus. If you guys know that stage in Star Fox 64, this game needs a Zonus, because it just doesn't have one, and that's kind of missing. So it needed a Zonus. And then the expert mode. So the cool thing about this game is, you'll notice when I'm playing, except in this level, I'm using the black ship. I really love the black ship. Again, that's something I would love to have seen in the original, or in Star Fox 64. What it is it's a ship that takes way more damage and is more fragile than the traditional R-Wing. But it just has way more firepower. It has double lock-on, and then it has just these beast lasers that melt enemies. So it's a powered-up ship. So that's kind of like expert mode of... it's like the expert mode in that sense, because in expert mode of 64, your ship isn't more powerful, but it's more fragile, and then the enemies are more aggressive. But in this, since your ship is more powerful, it's harder in some sections and easier in others. So what I really would have liked to have seen is a true expert version of each stage. So they have after you get all the medals and clear regular versions, they have the expert versions. What's interesting is that there is one stage like this, which is the best stage in the game. It's Corneria 2. So Corneria has a second version, which is just way harder and more aggressive. That is the expert version of it. And so I wish they would have carried that into all the other main flight stages and the tank stage. That would have been really cool. But unfortunately, they didn't, and there's no way they're ever going to return to this game and do DLC or anything like that, so that's a shame. So that's kind of the in my opinion, the biggest flaw with the game, is that there's no true expert mode. There's kind of a half expert mode with the black ship, but there's not the true, other than Corneria, so that's why I feel like, even despite all the cool stuff this game does with controls, Star Fox 64 is still the better game, because the level design is a little bit better in most stages, a little bit. Because I think the level design in this game is good for the most part, minus those helicopter stages, which you can basically just ignore. And then the expert mode. The expert mode adds a lot to Star Fox 64, which it doesn't exist in this one as much, so that's a shame. But I consider this game still definitely the second best Star Fox game ever made, and really a rail shooter must own. If you love rail shooters, you gotta have this game because it's really good. And so let's talk a bit more about some of the other criticisms I want to address and other things I would like to talk about. And one is the graphics and slowdown. So even DF Retro kind of shit on this game a little bit, which, they were kind of my only, besides the completionists, they're like the only people I was like, well, maybe they'll give this game a fair chance. Because even the, it's a bad day when even the Nintendo fanboys, Game Explain, even they give this game a bad review. I was like, ooh. But again, they like Nintendo for like Pokemon and... See, that's the problem with Star Fox and to a lesser extent Metroid is the reason why Nintendo doesn't really do a lot with this franchise is that it's not really a Nintendo-ish franchise. Nintendo franchises are like Pokemon, and I like them all. I'm not trying to talk smack on them, but I'm just saying that Pokemon, Zelda, Mario, those are all very inclusive, accessible style games. They're made to be that way. That's part of their fundamental design. Whereas Star Fox 64 and Star Fox Zero, the Star Fox series, is more on the hardcore side of things. It's more about actual challenge and difficulty. And so, yeah, it doesn't always appeal to a lot of those types of players. Like I said, a lot of those people think they really like Star Fox, but have they actually medaled every single stage and done all that, or have they just played through it once and thought it was cool because of the novelty of it? So, yeah, so the graphics of this game, I was very happy with the way the graphics in this game turned out. A lot of people feel like it's too, I don't know what you call it, like too much like the 64 version, really. People wanted, I don't know what they were wanting exactly, because what I think Star Fox in HD, this is what I think of. I think of, it still has those really hard lines, those really like, the aesthetic term is polygonal, really polygonal design. I feel like that fits the series really well, and I'm glad it looks that way. I think the graphics in this game are awesome. I have no problems with them. And I'm actually really tired of the newer aesthetic of Nintendo games. Yeah, people are gonna hate me, but whatever. Like, I feel like Nintendo games as of late are going in like this really, really cartoony style where it looks, and not like a cell shade anime stuff. Not like Wind Waker. I actually really like the way Wind Waker works, where it's like cell shaded anime. But they're going in this. Oh yeah, by the way, I just cut this fight because it was me flying around for longer than needed to be, and I'm trying to keep this video shorter than 2 hours, so I chopped that down. But anyway, they have that kind of cartoony, like Pixar-ish look to them. Like they look like Pixar, more like Pixar to me than anime or anything like that. I don't like the way Pixar looks, and so, like, yeah, look at Super Mario Odyssey is a great example. Like, the game, it kind of looks like Nintendo takes a lot of inspiration from Pixar these days with their animation. Like the Pokemon games kind of look like Pixar movies to me sometimes, recently. So, I'm glad you could tell Platinum did the visuals for this one, because they made it, again, a little more hard-edged. And I think the graphics look amazing. As far as the slowdown goes, so yes, this game does have some slowdown in some sections. The thing is that, well, for one, Star Fox 64 did have slowdown, but it's an N64 game, so that's not really a good excuse. But one thing I will say, it's just the Wii U. I don't want to tell you, the Wii U is not the most powerful system around. But if the slowdown is bothering you, there is a bit of a solution. Some people won't like this, but if you drop the resolution down to 480p or 720p, it does reduce the slowdown. In fact, if you're down on 480p, the slowdown is not that noticeable at all. It only happens in some very select parts. But if you have it in 1080p like I do here, then yeah, there's a little more slowdown than I would like in some levels. But it's not absurd, it's not out of control. If you're a shmup player, it's just another day in the office, not a big deal. This is the best stage of the game, by the way, Corneria 2. This is what I would love to have seen for every single stage. After you medal them, you unlock the expert versions. So yeah, that would have been really cool, because Corneria 2 is just amazing. It's a really good stage. And I think this is a PB right here, because I know I did a couple attempts here. Oh, another big improvement of Star Fox Zero that I definitely need to mention, like over Star Fox 64, is that there is a stage select. Thank God. Finally. There's actually, a lot of people aren't aware or don't remember that Star Fox 64 had a remake on the 3DS, and it was really, really good. I really liked that remake. The only issue with it is that it's on the 3DS, to be honest. Like, I mean, it's stuck on 3DS. I would have loved to have seen it also on a home console, too. But yeah, it's a really good port. And the biggest improvement of that port is they added stage select. And it carries over in Star Fox Zero as well. So yes, you can stage select. That's why, in a way, these those gyros, those gyro levels aren't that big of a flaw, other than they're a missed opportunity. Because once you play them, to get the medals, which is not hard, be a couple of sessions, you never have to play them again because you can stage select around them. And yeah, I think Star Fox is a series that lends itself well to stage select. And I know this game has an arcade mode. The idea, I like the concept. The extra mode is called arcade, where you play through and it counts your score across the run, which is really cool. And it's I think you have limited continues and such. It's like playing it in an arcade cabinet or whatever. The issues with arcade mode are, one, you can't use the black ship in it for some reason. Don't know why, but you can't black ship through it, so that kind of... I mean, black ship's the way to play this game once you unlock it. Yeah, by the way, the black ship you can unlock either by owning the amiibo, which I wouldn't really recommend, that's not necessary, or by medaling each stage, which I think is the better way to go about it, unless you really want the amiibo, I guess. Because that's how you unlock expert mode, and so it makes sense, right? This is kind of the expert mode, sort of, so... Anyway, I'm losing track of what I was saying. Sorry. But, yeah, so... I was talking about... expert mode. Oh, I was talking about arcade mode. There we go. So, in arcade mode, you can't use the black ship, which sucks. And then, obviously, you can't skip the stupid gyro level. The stupid, whatever they call them. The flying helicopter ship thing. I don't want to call it a gyro, because that's the name of the control system, so I don't know if that's what it's called. It might be called that. But here, remember I mentioned earlier about, see, a lot of people would hate this section because they're trying to play it in the other version, like where it's locked onto that tower. You don't have to do that. You just press select, switch over to first person mode like this, play it. And then I could switch out of it already, but I'm just kind of enjoying playing in first person mode right here. But then when the cutscene's over, you hit select and you will exit first person mode. Why I ran. Like, I could have exited a long time ago. There we go. And there you go. It's not that big of a deal, really. Just hit select and play in first person for a while. Anyway, so... yeah, so I feel like arcade mode really, at the end of the day, is not that great of an inclusion because of those two things where you can't play black ship and you can't avoid the stupid things. So what I tend to play this game anyway, stage by stage. I think that's kind of the way Star Fox works a lot of the time, is you're trying to just get the highest PBs you can on the stages, and it tracks that for you, so that's really nice. And then also what's cool is that you can get mid-stage score splits, like in this, which is really helpful too, actually, because you can chop out a run, right? So as you're playing through and you get a mid-stage score split and you're like, ooh, that's a bad split, you can just reset the run there. You don't have to play through the rest of the stage. Yeah. So that's really cool that they did that. And again, it's kind of paying. So the last thing I want to talk about before we run out of time, because I'm already talked about this game for close to an hour, is the scoring system improvements. Because for the most part, this game is similar to the scoring system in 64, which is good, because the scoring system in 64 is actually really solid. But there are some things that they improve on that I really like. The first is that I didn't mention this earlier, and this is kind of more to do with controls, but your lock-ons in this game are way better than they were in 64. Like, lock-ons in 64 were kind of not that great. They were good, obviously, but the issue with them is that they were really slow, and they kind of were finessey, and if you turned, they wouldn't complete most of the times. So, a lot of, like, long-range fights and stuff, or, like, an issue that comes up in 64 all the time is, I mentioned this earlier, where you lock onto an enemy, and it's like across the screen from you, and it's going to take forever for that lock on to hit, and then another enemy spawns, and you want to quickly fire at that enemy, like an enemy formation spawns, and you want to lock onto that formation, but since your lock on shot is already like taking forever to cross the screen, you end up just missing it. I mean, obviously that's where practice comes in and where learning level layouts come in. But I do like how in Star Fox 64, or Star Fox Zero, the lock-ons are just better, so that you can take out enemies faster with them. And then, yeah, also can turn and fire at stuff that's trying to sneak by you. Oh, I haven't even talked about the chicken walker, have I? So I guess I should quickly talk about the vehicles. Let me finish with the scoring system. So the coolest addition to the scoring system is if you kill an enemy with your laser shot, just your regular firing laser, normally in Star Fox 64 that just gives you whatever that enemy's worth, usually just 1 point. And so that's usually kind of a little bit of a fail on your part, where you probably should have tried to kill him with a lock-on if possible. And I just skipped through the first part of this stage, which is fighting the Star Wolf team, just because I didn't want this video to go on for too long. That fight takes a bit, so. But yeah, I've already medaled, by the way, so. But anyway. So, with in Star Fox Zero, though, if you fire at an enemy and kill it, if you keep shooting its remains, you'll get extra points by blowing up its remains. So what that means is that in this, it makes your laser fire a lot better, a lot more balanced, because in Star Fox 64, the best way to score that game is to use only charge shots and to use unlocked charge shots, and you're just getting a ton of splash damage and extra hits. And I'm sure in this game that's also probably the best way to play. But it's less of an issue to have to fire at an enemy, because you can shoot their remains and get some extra points that way. So I think that's a nice addition to the scoring system that makes it a little more dynamic than just always trying to hit everything with a charge shot. Like, using a laser shot in certain scenarios becomes more valid, which I like. And especially with the burst fire. So I think that was another good addition to the scoring system. Bombs as well. Bombs in this game, like charge shot, work way better. They're just more reliable. They blow up when you want them to blow up. They just work better than in 64. Everything to do with controlling the ships in this game is better than 64. But 64 isn't bad. It's just a little bit better. So let's talk about the vehicles before I run out of time here. So, yeah, there's 2 extra vehicles, and then there's the Landmaster with some upgrades. So let's start off. I talked about the chopper thing. That thing sucks. Definitely the worst vehicle ever. Those levels are boring and lame. Don't play them, get your medals, and move on with your life. It's my opinion. Yeah, that was a bad idea. I feel like someone at Platinum should have been like, Miyamoto, okay, I know you like this chopper idea, but let's make this a little more exciting here. Let's make it like an attack chopper, not this boring carrier chopper which drops little droids and hacks the computer system. But the other one is the one everyone really loves to poke fun at is the Chicken Walker, right? And everyone says the Chicken Walker sucks. I don't agree. I think the Chicken Walker is a cool addition because it kind of answers that desire everyone has for Star Fox to have some sort of on foot type stuff. Like everyone kind of wanted that. Like that's I honestly feel like that's why Star Fox is so heavily emphasized that. Or and Star Fox Assault is a GameCube game made by Namco, I believe, where it has some laser, R-wing sections, but most of the game you're like on foot, and it's kind of not that great of a game. It's not that bad either, but definitely not that great. So the Chicken Walker, which, if people don't know, that's also in Star Fox 2, the SNES canceled game, but it wasn't brought into 64, which I think is fine. But I do like the Chicken Walker. It kind of plays like an N64 style game. So I think that's why a lot of people had trouble with it, because the way they wanted to play the Chicken Walker is they wanted to play it like it's a third-person shooter, where you turn and aim with your right analog stick like a third-person shooter, and then you move with the left stick. That's not how it works. Instead, what it is it's basically like GoldenEye, where you move and aim with the left stick, and those are combined together, kind of like a little bit of tank controls. But then you can also strafe and boost with the right stick. But the thing is that people forget about is that you can Z-target with the Chicken Walker on most fights, like with Andros here. And that's really what you're supposed to be doing in the fights. And then all it is like playing Zelda Ocarina of Time, like good old-fashioned Z-targeting. So yeah, I think it works well. You just kind of have to understand how to use it a little bit. But I do like the addition of the Chicken Walker. And I think, I don't know, people making fun of that it looks like a chicken. I mean, obviously it's supposed to look like a chicken. This is Star Fox. The pilot is a cute little fox and his band of little merry, woodland creatures. Like, what do you expect the walker to be? Like, yeah, it looks like a little chicken. So, I don't know. I think people just, once they started dogpiling on the game, they just went to town. It's like, okay, the Chicken Walker is stupid because it's a chicken. But, of course it's a chicken, right? That's the fun of it. So, anyway. I think it looks cool. And yeah, it controls better than people give it credit for. You just have to remember that this isn't a third-person shooter. It's a Star Fox game. And so, yeah, I'm sure people are going to give me a lot of business for how heavily I'm defending this game, but it's like no one else really is. It's not like I'm in, like this is like a trendy thing to do. No one is giving this game its due, and I feel like it deserves it, so I'm kind of laying it on as thickly as possible. And so I guess the last thing that people have had an issue with, which to me was kind of interesting, was people were upset with the story of this game and how it wasn't like a direct sequel to Star Fox 2, or to Star Fox. That it was like a remake of Star Fox 64's story. And to that I say, I don't know, whatever, I guess. Like, is that really what's important? I don't know. I don't play Star Fox for the story. And really, the story is supposed to be kind of like a campy homage to Star Wars anyway. Which is funny because Star Wars is campy, but this is like extra campy with little, creatures. And I feel like the story, it entertained me. I was perfectly fine with it. It like brought back the old characters. I don't know, but I think people, again, they're like, they watched The Force Awakens, and so they wanted to take out their issues with The Force Awakens on Star Fox. Personally, whatever, the game's a rail shooter. I mean, yeah, if you don't like the story, you don't like the story, but really, is that the most valid form of, is that the, because people spend a lot of time, I've seen reviews where they talk about this at great length, like this is a huge issue. Like, the last thing I'm worried about is, plus two, like, the idea was to remix the stages and to remix the game, right? To bring back Star Fox 64, basically, but with some extra stuff, some like a remix. And I think it does that job well. And so I guess if you wanted new locales, right? Like you didn't want to go play different planets. There are new planets like Fashina, I think it is. Like that's a totally new planet. Look at that black R-wing. See, isn't that badass? I don't know why people have issues with the graphics. I really don't. I think they look really good. I think people like I don't know what they were expecting the game to look like. I like the style though. I think it's good. So yeah, I guess if you play Star Fox for the story, you're gonna be heavily disappointed, I guess. Though I do like the little things they did with like returning to Corneria. That was really cool. And yeah, so there's so much to say about this game, and I've definitely tried to cram as much as I could into this and make it as articulate as possible. I'm sure I rambled in some spots, but overall, let me give my final summaries of Star Fox Zero. I feel like it is not as good as Star Fox 64. 64 is still the best of the series because of the level design. However, the control issues that people go on and on about and just cannot seem to get over, I feel like those I don't know. Again, I guess it just comes down to what you're looking for. If you're looking for a casual romp through the meadow, an easy time where you just have cheap thrills. I don't know I don't know what to say exactly, but if you're looking for, I guess, a more cash experience where you don't have to learn anything and try, yeah, this game's not going to work out because the game's going to force you to learn how to play it its way, which I think is honestly, again, I think that's pretty badass that they made that decision. I feel like games these days are a little too hand-holdy, a little too compromised, where they're gonna start you off on easy mode, you know what I mean, type of stuff. I like when game developers kind of push the players to, really play the game a little bit, so. Plus, I think the level design is created around the motion controls very deeply because they allow you to do shit you just can't do without them, right? I've talked about that a lot, and I'm just really hoping that point hits home is that you can play this game without motion controls if you mod your Wii U to think your gamepad or your PS4 controller is a gamepad. But when you do that and play this game, you're not having more fun, you're having less fun, at least in my opinion. The game is trying to, make you do a little bit of coordination, And once you get really good at the game, or even, somewhat competent at the game, it's really fun. And it's a worthy success for the Star Fox 64, I think. It doesn't outdo it, but it's definitely a worthy successor. I don't think it's a failure. I think its review scores are horrendous considering the crap they give good reviews to these days. Like, I think it's sad, honestly. I think it's sad that the one game that makes bold decisions with the controls and gameplay, the one Nintendo game that tries to push players to be a little more hardcore, actually try and learn something new besides the same old crap, gets just railed on by the critics. People refuse to even review it and play it because they can't stand the idea of having to learn the new control schemes. And then just whatever, your first-person shooter games, which I like FPS games, but come on, some games come out, like the Wolfenstein ones, and they get these awesome reviews. I played like the other two, and it's like, these games are alright, but these games are getting these killer reviews, and Star Fox 64 is just getting shit on all over the place. Obviously, I'm coming from a place of a niche taste, right? Like, most people don't play. I think it's just, in today's day and age, hardcore genres like this just aren't in vogue. Like, it's not. The gaming has moved away from, like, skill-based gaming, I guess you could say. Like, that's not the point of playing video games anymore. The point is, like, more, like, social and, like, cinematic. It's more about, like, storytelling and visuals. It's more like film these days, really. Accessibility and all those sorts of things, which is fine. which is fine, except, it just creates an environment, unfortunately, where skill-based games, they don't get their due sometimes. And I think Star Fox Zero was a really classic example of that I will continually bring up probably forever. As long as I do gaming YouTube, I'll probably bring up this game because it's such a classic example, right? Like, Polygon writes this big old article refusing to even review it because they had to play with these gyro controls, which are honestly really good. You just have to learn how to aim, and learn how to reset the reticle. And it's totally doable once you learn how to do it. It's really, okay, I've talked about this enough. So anyway, my review of Star Fox Zero is that I think the game is extremely underappreciated. And this isn't like one of those situations where someone on Metacritic gives what's the Breath of the Wild a 7 out of 10, and everyone shits their pants about it because, Zelda deserves super high scores, which I have no negative feelings towards Zelda. I'm just saying, people don't dare review Zelda badly, right? They don't dare do that. And, but the thing is that who cares if Zelda gets a 7 out of 10 or 10 out of 10? It doesn't matter, because they're gonna make another Zelda game. It's gonna happen. It doesn't matter at all what the review scores of Zelda games are. Zelda Breath of the Wild could have came out with a 2 out of 10. They're making another Zelda game after that. That's just how it is. With Star Fox, I don't think that's the case. I think the reception of this game buried the Star Fox, the traditional Star Fox formula. I think it's dead and gone. I think Nintendo gave it their last effort. They're like, okay, we're going to get Platinum to make this game. They're like the hot kids in town when it comes to making action games. And Platinum's got a lot of rep with the gamers. People love Platinum. People love Bayonetta. So they're going to make Star Fox Zero. And then we're going to, actually use the gyro controls for something interesting. We're actually going to use the gamepad for some stuff. That was awful, but... yeah, we're going to do that. And it's going to be badass. And everyone totally turned their nose up against it. I'm pretty sure the game... I should research this, but I'm pretty sure the game did not sell all that well. Especially compared to most Nintendo stuff. A good example is everyone's shitting their pants about Pokemon Sword and Shield right now, right? Yeah, not to stick my foot in that hornet's nest, but I'm just saying it really doesn't matter what the fan reactions are, like the hardcore fan reactions, what game journalists say. None of that matters. Pokemon is a moneymaker. Nintendo will continue making Pokemon games forever. It's just too much money. Star Fox, though, I feel like it was on the cutting room floor. It's like, this game made or broke the franchise. As far as getting traditional Star Fox. They're not going to throw away the Star Fox IP, obviously. But I believe the next Star Fox game is like a racing game. They're like, fuck rail shooters. Kids don't like rail shooters. Kids like Mario Kart. So let's make Star Fox like Mario Kart. That'll work. I kind of think that's what they're going with here. And I don't necessarily blame them from a business perspective. I mean, they gave it a good, college try with Star Fox Zero. I think the game is definitely worthy of being a Star Fox game. I think it's really good. But yeah, the reception was so bad. They haven't bothered to even port it to the Switch. And so I feel like, yeah, I mean, there's not really much that can be done for the Star Fox fans these days. It's just kind of a done deal now. But maybe my hope is if they bring this game to the Switch, which they could. I know people have talked about, oh, you can't bring it to the Switch because of the 2-screen thing. It needs 2 screens. It really doesn't. Just hit select and switch the screen. You can totally play this game on one screen, no problem. And yeah, they could even do some stuff to kind of work around that and make it even better if they released it. But I don't think they will, because I don't think Nintendo thinks it's worth their time. Star Fox is not It's not the moneymaker. It's not the critical darling. Why would they spend the time porting, this game that everyone just shit all over, and probably didn't sell all that well, when they could be porting, more Mario games, more Zelda games, like Zelda. Well, they did another one, like Link's Awakening, all that stuff. Those are the money makers. Why bother with Star Fox? It's a waste of time and money. So they haven't even re-released poor Star Fox 64, on the Switch. Maybe they will someday. Like the 3DS one. Like, I really want to see that 3DS port somewhere outside the 3DS, just because, it's just a handheld at the end of the day. Whereas the Switch is a better handheld, at least. So, yeah, that's my long, rambling review of Star Fox 64, my lecture on Star Fox Zero and Star Fox 64. If you love these games, you love rail shooters, give it a try. If people shit talk the game and its controls a lot, link them this video and say, well, this dude likes them at least. He seems to love Star Fox and rail shooters and all that. So maybe it's not as much of a failure as Polygon would want you to think. Thanks for watching.